How is square footage measured for appraisals? I don't know. No, I do know. I do know. I'm being silly, but here's why I say that. It depends on who's measuring. And so that's why I don't know. So appraisers, they're asked to go out and give an assessment and evaluation for the home. And what most people think is that, they always talk in dollars per square foot. Well, the dollars per square foot is the result of the appraisal. That's just a formula that can be done after the fact to make it easy for the generic public and people like me too. They're like, oh, I just ballpark what that cost is. But the reality is there's a very scientific way to do appraisals. It's about I'm making this part up, but I'm going to say it's about 95% science, meaning like here's how you do it, and about 5% art. But that art is that variation where it can vary from one appraiser to another. And I'd say a big piece of that art, people say, oh man, like the square footage, how do you calculate it? So there is what's called the American National Standard Institute. I think it's funny. The acronym is ANSI, ANSI, um, that kind of outlines how appraisers should verify and measure for square footage. So that's good. There's at least, some set boundaries. The reality is, what I've seen is that many appraisers will use just given information that already exists. So, for example, if it's an existing home, they might pull the square footage from the central appraisal district. That's not always correct. If it's newer construction, they might pull the square footage from the builder's plans. Again, not, I mean, should be correct. That should be pretty accurate, but things can change. So the reality is, I think a lot of appraisers kind of take I'm not saying the easy route. I'm not saying I blame them. I might do the same if I'm in their position, but they might take what's known and just assume it's good and accurate and move forward. They will cite where they got the measurements from. But if they truly had to measure it, what's interesting to me based on um, conversations I've had over the years, like the landing area for stairs. I don't know what it is, but something funky like can depend on how one appraiser might view that versus others. And we're talking, tens of square feet, not hundreds at that point. But it is interesting how it varies. And in fact, I'll put down here, and somewhere down here is a response that I've received from an appraiser talking about how certain measurements people round to the nearest foot, when in fact they should do. I think it was like 1/10 of a it was 1/10 of an inch or 1/10 of a square foot. But I mean, again, how precise are you being? What is this for? Because I can tell you this right now, if a home is 2982 square feet versus 3000, I don't think that 18 extra square feet will matter, not from an appraisal standpoint. They're looking, I mean, if you're missing a room, that's different, right? If you're 2900 square feet and there's been an addition and now it's 3500, absolutely significant. But I would say a few square footage here and there typically is not going to make or break the appraisal because again, while it does have some bearing, that's not how they come up with the big valuation. It's going to have some impact for sure, as far as a 3,500 square foot home, all things equal, of course, is going to be probably more expensive than a 2,900 square foot home. But the reality is, 3,500 versus 3,400, probably not that big a deal, not that big of a difference. So I hope that helps at least understand or helps you understand that there is a science. Whether they use or apply the science to be determined, and if and when they do apply said science, it still may vary a little bit. But overall, I would say don't focus on the details in this instance unless it truly matters. And that's what I meant as far as like look at the room count, make sure the size looks right and everything's there that needs to be there so that we're having an accurate valuation and not missing something. Again, not just because we're off, tens of square feet. So if you have questions, certainly reach out to us. The Mortgage Mark team is here to help. And as always, when you think mortgage, think Mark.